so excited to finally get these luncheons back in order. Really a huge thank you to Initiative who, got this off the ground and really encouraged us to start. So just with a few notes, we'll get started. So thanks for coming out. My name is Gage Berry. I am the new CIMA president. CIMA's been around since 1997. If all of the board members who are in attendance today would stand up, we are now at 25 board members who are helping us plan events, these socials, education events. We do a ton with philanthropy and mentorship. Those are some of my favorite aspects of giving back to Chicago. It's been 3 years of really tough for a lot of families, for a lot of careers. And CIMA is just trying to help Chicago have these fun luncheons, get together, do some happy hours. So if you can do one thing today, I want to talk about our partnership with Off the Street Club, Chicago's oldest boys and girls club. If you could follow their Instagram, it's really the best way to help them just get the word out about the events they're doing. If you could follow CIMA's Instagram, we're always resharing their content. But they've got the Firefly Ball, and then they also have the Battle for Hope coming up in May at the Cubby Bear. So as much as CIMA has our own events, we definitely love pushing out the Off the Street Club events that we partner with. So yeah. A little bit more about Initiative. We really appreciated them kind of being our inaugural luncheon since COVID. I'm glad so many people showed out or turned up today. It kind of shows that, clients, agencies, everybody's kind of trying to get back downtown and do stuff. And CIMA's excited to kind of be there and help everybody do that. So, Initiative works with some of Chicago's biggest brands from Boeing to CME Group to CB2, and then nationally we're live on the Zoom and recording this. They have clients across the country from Amazon to T-Mobile to Merck and Carnival Cruise Lines. So it's just great to kind of partner with them, be able to talk positively about the publishers that are around the country, but especially here in Chicago. And this year I sent it out, and hopefully you all saw it. Initiative struck the trifecta of being named Media Agency of the Year for Ad Age, Ad Week, and Festival of Media North America. So, wow. I learned this when they shared it with us, but you can blame Initiative for the fancy like Applebee's commercial, and they're also award winning for their In the Deep, which was a podcast series with Gilead about HIV in the South. So 2 award-winning campaigns that they're very excited to share. And with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator and additionally our 4 panelists. So with that, I'll let you all introduce yourselves instead of just going down the line. So thank you all for coming. There'll be more time for networking later, but I'm really excited for this discussion we're having. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabe. How do we know when these are on? It's on now, right? Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We are. We are. Thanks, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate the time, and it's exciting to get everyone in a room together. It's been a while. I think that we've done this since Gabe said, so thank you for the time, and certainly enjoy the food. Hopefully, we don't get in the way of that. I am Brad Feather. I'll be moderating today's session, and like I said, very excited to be here. I'll try to let the experts here speak, so I'll be standing out of the way as much as I can, and we'll just introduce ourselves in a row.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Kristina Lutz, EVP of Marketing at GSTV, fairly new role. I think some of my family is in the house over here. Most of my career actually was agency side, also publishing side for a while at iHeart, and then brand side the last couple of years. So hopefully can help bring a wide perspective.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Katz. I'm the U.S. head of verticals for Roku, overseeing the restaurant and travel verticals. So my job all day, I talk about food and travel, which are 2 great topics to be a part of. I've been with Roku about 4.5 years. Prior to that, spent some time at Snapchat, NBC Sports, and Big Ten Network. Spent my entire career in the ad community in Chicago and also in a sales capacity.
My name is Bryan Goski. I lead commercial sales for the sell side at VideoAmp. I promise Jeff and I did not coordinate sneakers. I just want to throw that out there. Next time we will for the whole crew. At VideoAmp, we are looking to raise the value of advertising, right? We feel like the industry has historically undervalued it, and our goal and mission is to do that. So happy to be here to talk to you about how we're going to do that today.
Guys, I'll say thank you for wearing Nike.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm Kevin Hartbarger. I'm a group director for partnerships for the Initiative Chicago office. And I just joined Initiative in August, but I have quickly fallen in love with the agency and working with people like Brad and some of the folks in this room, and excited to have this discussion today. I've been passionate about video for years and years and years, and even though a lot of my career has been on the digital side, I think video is that common currency. I think that we all have as as advertisers, as consumers, and just excited to have this discussion today.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And I almost wore those shoes this morning too, the exact same Jordan 1. So I'm happy I made a different choice.
We'll kick off the text. We'll kick off the text chain.
Yeah, exactly.
I never almost wore those. So.
They do make them for females
All
too.
right.
So next time. We'll start with a softball. Video is obviously the topic here, and we want to have some fun and not just talk about trends that we're all familiar with. So a toss up to the crew here, but besides for Succession, what's everyone watching?
I just caught up on that last night.
I
No spoilers. It's good. Ted
2 episodes
Lasso.
back.
Yeah.
You're 2 episodes back?
Yeah.
They're good. Ted Lasso, love. I'm about to start Yellowstone,
Oh, it's
which
a
I
good
know
one.
everybody else has watched, but
Oh, good one.
everybody's nodding. Is that a good choice?
That's good.
Yes.
You didn't mention anything on the Roku channel. That's fine.
Sorry.
Emerald, you sponsor that, so thanks for that. Appreciate the plug. Also watching Succession, Ted Lasso. My wife and I are big into like crime, like someone getting kidnapped, murdered, stuff like that. So we watch Fauda on Netflix. It's a good
Also a
one.
good one.
You got to do the subtitles because it's Israeli, and then another one, Tehran. So I just feel like really well prepared in case I get kidnapped. Yeah, that's kind of the goal behind it, just how I could get out of that situation. So those are a couple that we're watching.
Number 3 for Succession. Sorry, I have to mention it. Great show. I'm also watching reruns of Jesse on Disney Plus with my daughter, who's 6 years old. And then also finishing Outer Banks on Netflix, which is a great series.
One too, yeah.
Nice. Succession. Sure. Party Down, which I never watched the first time around, but now that it's back out, I'm sort of getting caught up. And then I feel like I'm perpetually behind. Like I only just finished Breaking Bad, I think a year ago. So I'm also now I'm really behind. I've been binging Saint Elsewhere.
Oh, wow.
Which predates, I think, a lot of people.
Wow.
Love that.
That's a good
I
one.
thought I would have more like Paw Patrol.
That's
Corey Goodson.
We've already watched all of them.
Yeah, a lot of kid stuff. For sure.
Great. Well, I said I wasn't going to talk too much about trends, but Kristina, I did want to ask you, like, what about the video landscape right now, as you've kind of been on all sides of it, excites you and the way it's evolving?
Well, I mean, the pie just keeps growing. That's what I think is so interesting about video. I remember, not to date myself, by the way, I haven't heard the word rerun in a really long time. That was good. Not to date myself, but I remember when we were going from calling TV video for a variety of reasons, because how do we define video? What does it look like? You can get it all these different places. And, here we are all these years later, still kind of having that conversation, which maybe is bad and good, but the reality is, consumer behavior, I mean, not just even in the last 3 years with COVID, but for some time has been changing so dramatically. And what, I'm probably don't have to, this is not news to anybody in the room, but consumers are just watching more and more, so the pie is getting bigger in terms of impressions and opportunities to engage with video. And I think that's really exciting, especially as a platform that is an out-of-home video platform, but it's sight, sound, and motion. So thinking about how we can engage customers with your customers, your brand customers with messaging in that way is exciting. And being within the video set for consideration is really, really important to us. So as that grows and we can be a part of it, that's really exciting for us.
I think you touched on 2 things there, which is really like choice overload, but also like channel overload. So like Kevin, I'm coming from the agency side. How do we plan for that? Like, how do we help our clients determine which channels to be on and which programming to align to, knowing there's so many choices out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly complex, definitely has become a lot more challenging, but it definitely is a lot more exciting, I think, because of the choice. I think one thing that has been great from a strategic standpoint is because there is so much out there right now, it really allows us to address the audiences that we're trying to reach in a much more meaningful way and a much more engaging way, because there is so much to choose from. It feels a lot less monolithic in a way. You know, we all said Succession when we talked about it. And so there are still some shows out there and things like live sports that sort of rally everyone around in a cohesive way, but being able to really hone in on audiences, align them with content that's meaningful to them, and engage with them in a deeper way, I think makes our job a lot more interesting. I think the challenge we have is, from a measurement standpoint, how do we adapt, the kind of legacy models of measurement to this space where there is so much fragmentation, there is so much choice, and there is so much differentiation among, with different audiences. That's the thread that we continually have to be able to pull together and report back to the brands that we work with on, the value that they're getting for being in this type of programming.
I mean, I loved how you said the word engagement, like just to kind of add to that a little bit. I think, attention's always been important, right? But like it's you can measure that in a lot of different ways. And I think kind of where we are now, based on what you were saying, is really considering how engagement and attention, how important that is with the fragmentation, because eyeballs are important, but if you're not driving consumer action based on the attention that you got, it's kind of meaningless. So that it's such a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Bryan, where do you see like the intersection of attention and action coming?
Well, I'm picking up on a couple themes. So I'm picking up on fragmentation and the difficulty that presents in measurement. Totally agree with that. And there's so many, there's a lot of layers within that comment, right? When you think about fragmentation, you have to think about it in a multi-dimensional way. And this is how at VideoAmp we sort of approach it, right? How do you make sure that you are measuring across the appropriate platforms, whether that is linear TV plus Roku plus, another platform that your client wants you to. GSTV. Out of home. How do you make sure when you do that the data is passed in a way that's privacy safe, right? We want to make sure that privacy is obviously a big topic for everyone in the room, especially for clients at agencies that we work with that have first party data. How do we transmit that data across boundaries in a way that makes everyone comfortable? Third is identity, right? So once you do that, how do you make sure that when I'm counting a household or person, depending on what's important for the end client, how do we make sure that we're counting persons across platform correctly, households across platform correctly? If I'm using TransUnion, if I'm using Experian, if I'm using OpenID, if I'm using some other ID frame, then that becomes very difficult because, as anyone knows in data science, you lose fidelity between all of those different identity sources. Right. So it's like fragmentation is difficult. What's really difficult are all the layers underneath it and how you ladder that up and bring it all together to create a framework that works.
Jeff, is that something like Roku is considering doing for this upfront season, or just your biggest planning season? Like, how do you sell programming tied to identity, tied to privacy, and then ultimately like measure it? I'm sure it's a question you get asked a lot.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, like Roku is the largest streaming platform, so the platform where most people are accessing content like Succession or Ted Lasso or any of the programming that you might be streaming in your own household. I think what's probably most interesting about the point that Kristina has made is with the pie getting bigger, you have like this paradox of choice. Like, how do you actually get to the customer when a lot of us might, churn our subscription service or share passwords, or there's a lot of information out there about Netflix, like cutting down on password sharing because none of us share our passwords, right? Because we're all like upstanding individuals. That never happens. But that being said, we have some really interesting data that because the pie has gotten so much bigger, the average person spends 11 minutes per session trying to figure out what to watch on our home screen. And that's increased over 50% in the last 4 years.
Wow.
Because there's so many, like so much has changed in the last 4 years, but even something like now Netflix has ads, or like Disney Plus wasn't in existence.
Yeah.
Like if we were to do a kind of an audit on like what's happened in the streaming space the last 4 years, it's pretty remarkable. So, you know, now it's good timing because Bryan and I are now going to be best friends, but we now work with third-party measurement partners like VideoAmp. We're going to be doing some work with iSpot because as the largest platform, that's obviously a great privilege and a great position to be in. But the reality is we know that our client partners or agency partners have relationships with VideoAmp or others, and that's how they want to measure the media that they're running. It's the way that they want to use planning tools, for example, to balance reach and frequency, which is a very big topic for us at Roku. So as a platform, we have some really unique insights, even on like what are the most searched terms by people that may be Carnival clients, for example. So there's a lot of fun data and insights that we can provide because a lot of the impressions that come in the streaming space come through our TVs and devices.
Yeah, and I think frequency is definitely something that keeps me up at night with all the fragmentation. Just the idea that like we don't want to piss consumers off because we won't stop talking to them, right? So I think it's, you know, having these sort of, you know, cross channel, cross device measurement capabilities, which then allows us from a planning standpoint to control for frequency and not, you know, be hitting the heaviest viewers over and over the head sometimes, and know like when we need to expand, like where can we find those people we're not capturing through, you know, a current channel, through a current partner. That's definitely, I think, an aspect of measurement that we really want to latch onto from a strategic standpoint.
Yeah, I love that. And like one comment is, if we can't measure impressions at a baseline, outcomes and everything else are meaningless, right? If I can't count, if anyone from an agency can't count the impressions across all of their buy, how are they going to measure appropriate outcomes? Because you could be over frequencying 3 channels and then therefore driving the outcome that you're delivering back to your client inefficiently, right? Or worst case scenario, giving them wrong data, right? So first thing you have to do is be able to count impressions. That's like baseline. And then you can do reach and frequency, right? Basically. Yeah. And then you go to the outcomes after that, right?
I still think like there's obviously huge gaps that need to be closed with cross-channel measurement. Like we've made great strides as an industry over the last few years, but what is that one piece we're missing? What's stopping us, in your opinion, from doing that? Is it currency? Is it the way that we transact? Is it technology that doesn't communicate across channels? What is like stopping us from getting there?
So it's not currency, right? Because there's this conflation in our industry of currency measurement. So let's put this one to bed, right? Currency is just when the agency and the network decide they're going to transact on a metric. That could be Dogecoin, it could be Bitcoin, it could be on VideoAmp, it could be on Nielsen, it doesn't matter, right? It just depends on how that business relationship comes together and what they decide. I think that's like, we should focus on that. We were having this conversation before about measurement. Like as measurement providers, I always like to say, we like to stay 2 steps behind the TV networks, our partners, and the agencies. Why is that? It's kind of a funny thing to say, right? Because you think, hey, we want to be in front of it. But the reality is that everything's always evolving, right? We live in this ever-changing state of the industry. You're never going to be ahead of it because there's always something new that's coming out, right? Like Roku could roll something out that we need to measure. They're going to be ahead of it. So we have to say, hey, let's partner together to make sure that we do that integration. Integrations don't happen in 30 days. Integrations happen over 6 to 9 months, right? There's a technical lift that has to happen. Then we have to check with all of our agency partners to say like, hey, should we do that integration? Does it make sense? You know, like for our network partners, does that make sense? So you have to kind of go through all those steps. And next thing you know, you're 2 years out. So you're like behind the curve, but you're still measuring. That makes sense.
I think part of it too, and Kristina, your experience and Kevin's would lend itself to a better answer than what I'm about to give, is like for decades, it was just this one agreed upon currency in linear television, whether you agreed with it or not, because Nielsen's panel is only 100,000 homes, like that was just the source of truth. And you kind of threw your hands up. And like when I was at NBC, that's when they pulled their Nielsen contract for CNBC. Because if you think about something like CNBC, like it's being consumed on the floor of stock exchanges or in financial services offices. And this is remarkable.
Hotels.
Yeah, like we would see the numbers. And if like one woman in Colorado decided not to watch CNBC that day, that meant nobody in the country was watching CNBC. And I feel like the challenge now as we move into this newer space is that there are a lot of different options. I think my only guidance, and we say this to clients, is like whatever you choose as your source of truth, like that's where we're trying to be more amenable, and we made a ton of progress in that area. But you should definitely do something, because I feel like we could look at it through the lens as a consumer. The worst thing you could do as a brand is have way too much frequency. Like, I'm not going to call out specific people in the restaurant space. We see it, and especially because they're so tied to like jingles, for example. Like, we all could have that jingle in our head way too many times, and now through digital pipes to be able to bring an infrastructure to say like, hey, you've actually reached that customer a certain number of times, or maybe there's a high value customer based on your first party data that you haven't reached enough. Like, why don't we serve more ads to those people and suppress Bryan because he's already bought your hamburger yesterday, maybe doesn't want to buy that again today. So I think there's more that can be done, but I think it's helpful to have more of these measurement partners in place.
Well, it's also a shift of planning and buying towards an audience, a specific person versus a program,
right?
Or maybe an intersection of both, as I'm sure you guys have, like we did with Emerald, big platforms that you could buy against, but also very specific targeting and identities that you could align to as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a shift. I think like from a contextual alignment standpoint, certainly sports, which Kevin mentioned briefly. Now, if you look at linear television ratings, it's just dominated by sports, and I think that's a huge shift that we've seen in at least talking with customers. Is yes, there's this sort of retraction of spends on linear television, but live sports is still just a massive reach vehicle, or even reaching different audiences. Like we were talking about on our prep call, it was so interesting to see how when Amazon acquired the Thursday Night Football package, like the audience profile was so much different than the same people watching the NFL last year on Thursday nights that were watching it on traditional through a linear feed on Fox, or Sunday NFL on Fox or NBC or the other providers. So I think it speaks to more so than the area of opportunity for brands is, all right, I could speak differently to that audience, even though it's the same environment. It's still the NFL, it's still the same type of product, even the same announcers, so bringing them over from NBC, for example, but there's different ways to speak to them. So I think there's definitely still room to have those alignments with content, but for Roku, we've pretty much always been an audience play. What's interesting is now we're reversing things a bit and getting more into original programming like the one that you referenced, just to frankly make our own Roku channel stickier. So, hopefully if I'm asked back to do a panel, a few years from now, or not fired for doing something stupid, we'll be talking about some of those as bigger shows, but nonetheless, I think you have so many options out there that you could either tailor your message to the program or just to buy that audience.
Interesting. I think kind of tied to that conversation too, but either Kevin or Bryan, one of you mentioned attention and action and the intersection of the two. Historically, video on the big screen's always been considered as awareness, but now with things like Roku and other interactive opportunities, it could very much connect to commerce. And we were talking about this earlier too, but just interested to see how clients are thinking about that too, full funnel with video versus just awareness.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, yes, that's true, but we've also known for 20 some years that when you're live on television, your search traffic goes up, right? Yeah. So I would argue it has been a performance channel. It's just we haven't had sort of one-to-one attribution of it, but we see that behavior, and especially now that people are in like a multi-screen environment where it's like ad, call to action, it is immediate, and so I think the more that we can start to layer in things like multi-touch attribution to understand what is that connection between call it awareness or brand advertising. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all performance advertising in some respect, right? Like we are trying to get people to take an action. It's just it sort of sits at different parts, but maybe it doesn't, because we have seen again search data or site visit data. There's a lot of ways that we can tie in viewership to immediate action. And I would say like GSTV is probably a great example where it's like literally someone saw the ad and then they drove to Arby's. Like that's awesome, right? Yeah. And so that is performance media at its finest. So the measurement piece I think is going to help us understand more about like how all the points in the ecosystem are pointing to driving some kind of action.
So if we link that with what you were saying before, Bryan, about the ability to pull all of these platforms together and I don't want to quote what we were saying over to the side, but
Go for it.
your thought that there's zero probability of getting to a point of being ahead of everything that's out there.
Yes.
When we, selfishly, in terms of our platform, we're measured as video, we're out on the go as consumers are running around. Like how do, I'm gonna look at you, and how are agencies thinking about that right now in terms of the overlay, and the fact that you can't look at those things together. You can look at things within ecosystems to understand that driver. But I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges is how to, for frequency, like you said, Kevin, but also how do we understand all the points along the way of that consumer journey that really give us the answer of what's driving that action.
I think
I'm asking you, moderator.
Can I say one thing on that?
I'm all of a sudden on the panel now.
I want to mention two things, like going back to what Kevin said and then addressing that. So, let's TV, meaning linear plus, right? Because TV is just taking new shape. It's not just linear. Let's think about it in a broader sense. Is absolutely a performance channel. We just did a study with Paramount. We did 40 case studies with them, right? Case studies meaning that we tied our data set. We have a larger data set, it's 40 million households, to outcome-based measurement for folks like Ford. You can look it up on our site. We carry the agency to do an outcome-based, or GM, to do an outcome-based analysis. And so when you have that level of scale, you can look across partners, meaning look across networks. In this case, we worked with Paramount, but we can look across multiple networks and then tie that to things like advanced audiences beyond persons level demos, right? Traditionally, and likely for the foreseeable future, although please correct me if I'm wrong, TV will be bought in the persons-based or demographic-based front. But there are portions of organizations at Paramount, NBC Universal, others that use advanced audiences. What are those? Just for the room, it's someone beyond persons-level demographics, females 18 to 24 in market for a car, for example. And then you can today, like the industry can do this, not just VideoAmp, can tie that to an outcome-based performance metric. And we've shown, at least at VideoAmp, that works better, right? When you're more targeted, surprise, you're going to drive better outcomes. Like that works, right? So just sort of closing the loop on that, when we talk about things like out of home or measuring the whole pie, as a measurement company, that gets very, very challenging. We talked about that a second ago. Out of home is particularly challenging. Because you have to do that at scale, right? And so legacy methodologies have really rested on panels. You have 75,000 people in the PPM, the Arbitron panel, whatever it was. When you really go to scale, that stuff just falls apart. Anyone that's worked in data science has seen that. So like the question is, how do you represent, GSTV at scale and then tie that to the Arby's campaign in a way that's meaningful for your clients? And how do we do that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've certainly been able to do that with a lot of different research partners on individual cases and have a ton of great results from awareness all the way through to sales for a variety of those clients. I think the challenge is we can prove that so well within our own ecosystem and it works, but like, how does that then relate to what is going on in the rest of a brand's plan?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like probably a much less technical answer, but planning for an ecosystem of communications and not just paid channels, but understanding the interrelationships and the halos that every channel has on the next channel. Very similar to the analogy you gave, Kevin, with TV and search, but understanding the interrelationship between the two, as you would understand halos of brands that have multiple products and the impact that one might have on another. We would think of channels in the same way. Yeah. And it's both reach and scale, right? Like we have to plan for both of them.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think we've gotten savvier from a planning.
Impact and scale, not reach and scale.
Yeah. We've gotten savvier from a planning standpoint so that while it is still very channel driven, we've kind of expanded our thought around like what makes a channel up. So to the point earlier about, we used to say TV, now we say video, like we try to think about it holistically. I think a lot of times we do still silo around the sort of consumer, call it consumer mindset. Like is a consumer watching content? That's one sort of way to measure impact. Is a consumer like reading content? That's another way, or are they out doing something? That's another way to kind of measure impact. And so I think, that's a start to think there's sort of a broader ecosystem going on versus just a channel. From a vertical standpoint, hopefully we can start to, tie some of those or connect some of those dots, I should say, to understand how all those things are interacting with each other.
And I think you just triggered something for me. I think assets like creative assets get lost in that sometimes too.
Totally.
Like when you talk about silos, and I think back to my time at iHeart when, you know, are we radio? Are we local? Are we events? Are we sponsorship? It's like, where does it live gets lost in how we think about media types or channels, right? Versus the asset, the mindset that you're trying to reach with a consumer. And
they don't think that way.
Yeah, no. But if you have a great video asset, you should be thinking about all the places you can place that video asset, whether it's television or some random screen elsewhere, right?
I mean, such a good point. Like when I was at Snap, and anybody that uses social media, like the average Snap session at the time, and it's probably changed since I was there a few years ago, was like less than 2 minutes. So we would get all these assets from creative agencies, and they're like, yeah, just cut down my 30-second spot and make it like, you know, 5 to 10 seconds. It's like, you got to get someone's attention in like 2 seconds. And so some of the best performing ads, as far as whether it was app downloads, whether it was drive to stores, or even when I was in the insurance space, cost per incremental quote starts and quote completes, it was like people shooting on an iPhone. I'm sure you've seen it through your own habits. And I think that's an area where we're definitely lagging, is like, to your point exactly, Kevin, like my behavior as a consumer might be really different when I'm watching a football game versus when I'm watching Paw Patrol with my kids, or I'm watching one of those crazy terrorist dramas, you know, it's something light before I go to sleep at night on Netflix, for example. So that's where I think some of this additional data that we have can be really helpful. Like, we're not the first ones to do it on Roku. You'll see it on Hulu or other places, things like pause ads. Like the first pause ad that was ever on was for Charmin toilet paper. And that's perfect, because odds are if you're pausing, maybe you're going to use the bathroom. And so I think having more of these units, like we have a really cool commerce partnership with Walmart. We're able to link our data sets, and we created a spot for Enfamil baby formula. And the woman was holding her baby, and she turns to the camera and says, "Shh, be quiet." And you have the opportunity to actually order Enfamil off your TV screen. So I think there's a lot more, whether you're the publisher or the platform, there's a lot more of these opportunities to also bring in commerce, which is fun for the consumer, whether it's ordering food off your screen, maybe a cruise, whatever the case may be. I think the management of expectations is probably on like the sell side and the client side or agency side to manage. Like, you're probably not going to have the same cost per install off your television screen versus like a mobile campaign. But that doesn't mean it isn't working or hasn't worked forever. I love I don't know if it's you, Bryan, or Kevin, who said that television's always been a performance vehicle. I think now the change is like you can do it for more, or do more things with your television screen or television advertising than you could before.
And you have to balance what's effective and what's efficient too. Everything can't just be efficient. So
exactly.
It's another layer to it. We are almost at time, and we want to make sure that you guys have some time to ask us questions as well. So I think just a toss up to everybody, but what aren't we talking about enough? What are the white spaces that we're seeing in video? And what do you wish that the industry would kind of give more attention to?
Well, I think we've already talked about it, so I don't know if this is a good answer, but you know, from my perspective, it's how do we measure every screen? And how do we think about that holistically? And help brands and agencies decide where to put it and how to think about it and how to measure it and how to see the results. I think we've made a lot of good progress, but that's what I'd like to see, and I think that's what brands want to see. They just care about solutions and results.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great one. I think we've covered a lot of them. I think probably based on the last point I made, thinking about it through the lens of being a consumer is like, how do you get my attention in a more unique way versus just like lifting and placing what you've done in other places? Obviously more money towards new creative ad units, but I think there's a lot of area. I can only speak for our platform. I'm sure it's similar for either OEMs or channels where you can do some more unique things on the home screen, for example, or through interactivity or being able to actually buy things off your TV screen. I think that's probably a phase that we'll see some growth in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest white space is like taking a 10,000 foot rise and looking down, saying like, what's going to raise the value of advertising? Like, enough of the tactics, right? We can pass data through Snowflake. We can look at outcome-based measurement. Can we measure across platforms? You can get down to that. That's always a byproduct of that statement. But like, as everyone here on the stage, I think we have to take a step back and be like, be in the customer first mindset. Right. What is best for the customer that we're working with, and then create in our case, the measurement or the tactics around that, and then build from there.
And what are we doing to disrupt them that we shouldn't? And what do they need more of from us and things of that nature? Understanding their challenge and their mindset first and planning for it, I think is a big one too.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, look, our clients are trying to drive more efficiency, right? All of our clients in some way, better spending, better reach and frequency, whatever it is. Like, how do we do that better? Have the customer first mindset and then work backwards from that.
Yeah, and then all that stuff is great. And then I think the one thing we really need to be thinking more about, particularly, from a planning standpoint, the way we work with our brands is how things like TikTok, Meta, Instagram, video on social platforms fits into this equation, because I think what we're going to see is even sharper decline in eyeballs going to traditional programming. I wouldn't even say linear, but just like to TV, right? That thing that hangs on your wall that somehow programming comes into, I think starts to become less and less essential to younger audiences. And so as those younger audiences start to be our core market and the people that we're trying to create brand connection with, how does that all fit in, and what are the economics of that? Because right now, all of this great programming that we mentioned that we're binging is based on the economics of the current system, where there's dollars coming into an upfront marketplace, and there's dollars coming in through a subscription model. What happens when none of that stuff exists? Like, where does content come from? Who's paying for that? Well, it's you. It's all of us. So,
let's go somewhere.
Someone still has to pay for it. So, like, what is the impact then going to be on, on how we have to do our jobs of ultimately, getting consumers to take action?
Such a good point. Like, there's the data behind the fact that these massive tentpoles that a lot of us used to watch, like even the Oscars this year, more people are engaging with the Oscars on TikTok. It was far surpassed people watching it on a television screen.
Yeah.
So I think it's
I just like late night is all the late night shows basically create shows now to be chopped up into 6 minute, viral content that goes out on YouTube, TikTok, all the other platforms. Like, I don't know if they even care whether people watch at 10:30 Central on a weeknight. I just don't think it matters. I mean, there's obviously still some economics there, but the content is being created for short form.
Awesome. Bold predictions, like it. Great conversation. Thank you, everybody. And appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully this was helpful and an enjoyable experience. And we'll do more of these hopefully soon this year. So thank you all. And I think there is a mic. Where's Gabe? There you are. You do have a microphone. Does anyone have any questions for us?
So brave.
Come on, you guys. We know you
Not
have
everyone
questions.
at once.
Yeah, I'll walk over and hand off the mic if you have any questions, sir.
This is what happens when you sit in the front, apparently. I think you touched upon it a little bit, but I'm really curious about attention span with video. Do you think consumers are more interested in that short form video on a TikTok versus Instagram, or are they more interested in succession? And where do you think, in terms of planning, where you all lead towards, and from an agency perspective and from a sales perspective?
And what's ad supported?
That's fair too.
I'd like a brief comment on that, which is that I think both are true. They're not mutually exclusive. They both have to be true, and they're probably to a certain degree like age broken, right? Not broken, but there are age breaks between those platforms. You'll probably have a younger person, younger than me, on Instagram and Facebook, et cetera, like engaging on that content. So they're important. You also need the person on Succession who has the buying power to buy the stuff, right? Because they're the parents that probably have the disposable income to buy the GM, right? The 17-year-old might not be able to do that. So I think all of those are important in the framework, but you have to, like, I'd imagine, balance from planning and measurement point of view, being able to plan and measure across both.
I was just gonna say, going back to the analogy of like 10,000 feet and less about tactics, like you kind of have to plan for that experience. You don't have to plan for the channel, or you don't have to plan for the tactic or the creative, but what is the experience that the end consumer is going to see, and how does that tie to a business objective or a action that you want to create? Because the consumer, like you said, might be on TikTok, and that would be very different than someone who's watching Succession every night. So I think that's that experience that you have to plan for.
Well, I was going to say the same thing, but use the word
thank God.
mindset.
You said something.
No, but like I think that's kind of where I mean, I've been out of strategy work for a little while, but I would imagine that's one of the things you've really got to think about with all the different pieces, like you were talking about, is what is someone's you can't advertise in succession, but what is someone's mindset when they're sitting down for an hour watching a highly dramatic show, and how do you think about that versus the few seconds on Snap or TikTok, or any other environment? Even for ours too, it's like, what's the mindset of someone when they're fueling up their car, where they're about to run around and run errands? So like, those are all things that I think become dynamics that make it more interesting today than ever before, but more complicated because you have to think about all those pieces and, creative assets and all that goes along with it.
Yeah, the messaging really starts to play a role when, you're thinking about different attention spans and length of content and mindset and all of those things that, it's just a huge argument for not just creating one asset and hoping that it's evergreen.
Over here.
Hey guys, Dave Agnew from Silver Push. So I know we're in very early and infant stages, but I'm curious about how AI is sort of how each of your companies are thinking about AI, whether it's from a targeting standpoint, whether it's from a product standpoint, whether it's even going to be a thing in video. Very open question, but it's obviously the buzzword of our industry right now. So just wanted to throw that one out there.
I just missed the days when AI was Allen Iverson, but I'm a huge huge Hoops fan. Clearly, based on my shoes, more of a
It
Bulls
was
guy.
Reebok though.
Yeah, good call. Answer the answers. I think well, it's kind of timely. We actually had like our global security leads in last week, so I think they're thinking about it, frankly, more so from the standpoint of keeping everybody safe. I think there's definitely some things out there that are a bit scary from that perspective, not to be a downer. I'll be candid. I only jumped in for the joke. I don't have a great answer. We're not really talking as much about AI from like a video standpoint. I think back to the creative example, I think that's where it could become interesting, because I feel like one of the challenges is being able to be nimble. Like, this is such an outdated example, but it was so great what Audi put out there when the Super Bowl lights went out in the Superdome. Like, you have the ability to be more nimble on Twitter or on various social platforms. I think it's a lot more challenging to be that nimble on a television screen. So maybe that's an area where it could be helpful from like a creative production standpoint.
Yeah,
but
I'm a little scared of it though. Who saw Pepperoni Hug City on? Who saw that? Just one person?
What is it?
Oh my God! It's an AI generated commercial for a pizza restaurant, and I saw it on Twitter yesterday. Twitter is apparently still around, and I was on it. But no, look for it because it's scary. Because in some respects, it looks good. In some respects, it's frightening. Like the uncanny valley of it is frightening. I mean, I think it's an AI could be, as it gets better, could be an answer to that economics question of content, because it becomes a way for that. Certainly, I think it will help, and we'll start to see more of it being used from a measurement standpoint, because we'll be able to, apply machine learning to, to data that we have and sort of extrapolate from there in a more meaningful way. But right now, a lot of the applications I see of it are kind of frightening.
Yeah.
So I'd sort of challenge that a little bit. Like, AI is such a huge topic, right? And AI has actually been around for a really long time, right? If anyone has read not read Super Intelligence by Bolstrom, Elon Musk recommends it. It's a great book, just like a primer on like, what is AI? Because AI to me is like the buzzword of clean rooms. Like, everyone talks about it, but we don't really know what we're saying. So we kind of like half answer things. We employ machine learning at video. We have for like 5-6 years, right? So is that AI? Sure, I guess so, right? So it works. I think more interestingly, AI generated commercials, content, that kind of thing will be very fascinating for me from a measurement point of view, right? What happens if you don't need actors for the commercials anymore, right? How does that affect the economics of what Kevin was talking about before, right? There's so many detailed intricacies to that answer. that's sort of hard to answer, but I think it's a little less scary for me because we've been employing some of that stuff over the past couple of years.
But I think that's a good point too, because that impact on our industry will certainly be felt. Like in the conversations I've had with AI, it's less about media and more about content. And I think that comes from the creative agency in terms of like, how do you help us gain a POV on this? Because there is probably part of it that is like, okay, production. Right.
I gave less than a half answer, so you gave me credit there. I think mine was, I'll take the under on that. But yeah, I think that's where, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've seen or heard are like the uncanny voice, like you wouldn't know it wasn't President Obama because it was produced by ChatGPT. So to your point, exactly, like a lot of the creative, you're paying for a spokesperson, you're paying for actors, like there's high production value. I think that's definitely the first area where I could see it playing an impact in video is the ability to utilize that almost for creative purposes or as your creative agency versus, sourcing that out.
I read something interesting on that, and I'm probably going to butcher it because I don't remember it totally, but like, for me, there's like this question of like, who's the arbiter of truth when, Chat GPT or whatever insert tool here starts doing a lot of writing and creating and things like that. So that's super scary to me. But also, like, as more and more of that content is built in that way, how does it start to not regenerate on itself? You know what I mean? And how do clients or brands not come up with the same idea or something similar, and where did that really come from? So it kind of hurts my head to think about it, but like we're not thinking about it from a programming standpoint. I'm just kind of reading up, thinking about it more of in a brand perspective for our brand and how we talk to the industry, and could it help with writing blogs and things like that. We're investigating that right now, but just from a consumer perspective, I'm a little bit terrified of those other pieces.
And a truth perspective too. Like you need that human element.
Who's the arbiter of truth?
Yeah. A few more.
I didn't think I'd get a chance. Maybe taking it somewhere between social media and the AI conversation, give us some POV or perspective around some of the other emerging technologies like gaming, augmented reality, virtual reality, and where that fits into the conversation right now for you guys from, say, an audience and inventory perspective in the conversations you're having.
Virtual, for me at least, personal perspective, virtual reality and the energy or acceleration that it used to have in conversation has kind of taken a back seat, I think.
Agree.
All of the other channels or screens that you just said, I think, like, again, for me and for my clients, it's kind of like holistic. Because I mentioned this before about consumers and having to think the way they think. Like, they don't go and say, okay, I'm going to go stream, or I'm going to go OTT, or I'm going to go game. It's like, it's just a screen for them and it's just video. And we have to plan for their behaviors in that way and them not thinking the way. Like sometimes I think we actually overthink it and how we have to plan for the different deliveries or mechanisms of delivery for video. But in reality, it's just something that's probably being controlled by their thumb, and we have to stop that thumb really quick. So. Yeah.
I'll jump in here real quick. CIMA's very next event is in May, and it is about AI and the metaverse.
There you
go. Kristina, do you want to hop in and tell everybody who's here how they can become a member at CIMA, be more involved while we wait for our next question?
You bet. So my day job is GSTV, but my night job is membership for CIMA.
And lunch job too.
And lunch job, and whenever I have a minute. Thank you for the plug. I appreciate it. So just backing up a teeny bit, Gage was talking about how this is the first luncheon we've done in a while. Obviously, CIMA is well known for industry events from an educational perspective like this, but also social events. We did the holiday party again this last year for the first time in a while. So we've spent a lot of time over the last year kind of transparently rebuilding CIMA because so much was lost in COVID. We lost members, we didn't have the opportunity to gather. So we're really, really excited about a whole slew of things that are going to be happening in this year and beyond. And you can see everything that's scheduled, including our outing and holiday party, et cetera, on our website. And for those who want to join, it's super simple also on the site. For agency and brand members, it's free. That was a change we made this last year. And for publishers, it's only $100. I mean, it's the best bargain in the business. And you get access and discounts for all these types of events and efforts. And we're just continuing to build the membership, and we're excited that all of you came out today. So thank you.
Cool, that's great.
Unlike other events, this actually is water.
Yeah, kind of looks like milk.
You
but-
find those other events are not water based.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. You can have whatever you like.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you all for this panel. It's been awesome. On the topic of measurement, it's been a common theme, at least throughout, but we haven't brought up the discussion points around walled garden measurement, how that compares to independent measurement across, a lot of the programmatic ecosystem, and how others, at least that are providing at least their own form of measurement in the space, how that goes up to agnostic measurement in the space, and if that is taken into consideration within pre-planning when you're looking at omni-channel, connected TV, display, OLV, search, as all the media formats at least have been brought up.
I could
I feel like
kick that one.
that's you, yeah.
I feel like we all have perspectives on that one. Okay, so a couple things to unpack there. Number one is I think it's really important, at least from a third-party measurement provider point of view, to have partnerships in place to be able to measure like quote unquote walled gardens, right? So we mentioned partnership potentially with Roku in the future, right? How we might work with them. There are measurement functions that Roku can provide that VideoAmp probably can't provide, right? Just because the granularity of the data that they have is going to maybe be different than what they provision us. That said, Kevin also sort of needs to see across the ecosystem all of his channels. So it's incumbent upon, I think, on us, on measurement providers, and I think on folks like Roku and others, right, that are, I wouldn't call walled gardens necessarily, but independent platforms to, ideally work with measurement providers that they trust, that are doing it in the right way, and privacy safe way and all that stuff. I think that's the best way to get to what I said in the beginning, which is like baseline, like how many impressions are across the campaign, across all channels. Kevin's got multiple channels across Instagram, Facebook, Roku, potentially linear television, Amazon, whatever it is. Looking at all those in silos, it's a waste exercise, right? You'll never be able to understand all impressions across. So I think those two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, meaning that there can't be a Roku measurement function and a VideoAmp measurement function, but we do have to partner together to be able to give Kevin what he needs.
Yeah, we have a measurement partner program at Roku that includes over 30 third-party brands now, including VideoAmp. And for a while, like, of course, we do have a significant amount of our own first-party data because we have 70 million active accounts, and you create a Roku login. We also have ACR data, which is like the second-by-second footprint from your linear television feed. If you opt in to have ACR data, it's like basically Shazam for your television screen. But at the end of the day, we get challenged. It's like similar to a Facebook or Google, what have you, I guess is the right term. Like you're grading your own homework. Like, sure, we have our own first party data, but they want to use Bryan's team at VideoAmp to validate that, or look at things outside of Roku's platform, because there's certainly streaming happening on Amazon Fire Sticks and Samsung TVs, or through desktop, or well, not a ton of desktop, there's some mobile. And I think from that standpoint, what I think is kind of laughable, at least about like the Facebook piece, sorry if I'm going to go after Facebook for a second, is like they take credit for everything that happens, right? Because usually that last touch attribution, to your point earlier, was going to happen on a mobile device. So for years it was like, okay, because I saw this ad on Facebook, suddenly, well, my progressive quote had to happen because I saw Facebook. The reality is, as we all know, all this stuff works together. You could have decided to get that progressive quote because you heard an ad on the radio, or through your satellite subscription service, on TikTok, through word of mouth, which is something we don't even talk about, right? And so I think that's really the challenge with walled gardens, is like, how much credit should I be giving for what I'm doing with these certain partners? And I think that's where having that third party validation is helpful, because at least, and you could probably speak better to this on the planning side or on the measurement side, at least you're helping to close that gap. Like, I think that's at least one area that we're trying to work on, is like, does our data at least look representative of what you might be getting through a third party partner? There are definitely going to be differences, because again, for example, we're not going to pass back our first party data because it has to be privacy compliant, but does it at least like seem similar, whether it's even it's something as simple as, did I serve the amount of impressions I told you I was going to, and then did you validate that through a third party?
Yeah. And then I think we have incredibly good analytics teams that, can basically integrate and aggregate data coming from multiple sources and assign value to that, knowing that, certain data will have more value because it's coming through a third party versus a first party, and be able to look at that in an aggregate and be able, and then decision off of that, so that it's not necessarily like siloed or one-to-one decision, but that we are starting to think about this in a more holistic way and thinking about how to, how this can all be integrated together, even if it's not coming to us in one file.
Mm-hmm. And it's a real important topic, right? There's two like subsections to that topic, as the gentlemen were both talking about. One is like identity, right? So how do you resolve that? So now you have, Kevin's got 6, 7 different platforms. Everyone uses a different identity spine: Speedion, Experian, TransUnion, OpenID, whatever. How does he resolve all of that to make sure he doesn't lose fidelity in all the hops when he does MTA, right? Multi-touch attribution. That's a very challenging data science problem, right? So how do you figure that out? And I think there's some ways to do that from a data science point of view, but that's a really important point. And then how do you pass the data in a way that's privacy safe, right? This is a very important topic. Like Roku users aren't going to just, you're not just going to send an email with Roku users in it, right? So how do you make sure that in that identity concept that you can make sure we're counting for Roku users appropriately, maybe in aggregates of 30 or however the data pass happens, and that's first party data to someone else's experience mind, right? That's different. And then the other big thing that is like this red herring in a way, and I think the industry's thinking about it, but like keeps me awake at night, is user data right now is shifting, right? Like the industry shifting to more streaming. I think we all agree with that. So in the future, is it like the set-top box data providers, the MVPDs, the cable companies are going to own less of that data to a degree, and the content providers and creators are going to be the ones that really own that data. So as a measurement company, what we think about is like, hey, we need to partner with Peacock, we need to partner with Pluto TV, we need to partner with Roku, Amazon, everyone else, because there's a shift happening in data ownership that's going back to the content creators, as opposed to historically, you could go out and use data.
And we talked a lot about privacy, but I think having a third party come in like that to have transparency in the aggregation is crucial too. And we've made strides. We've talked about strides a lot, but we've made strides in getting transparent and clean data from the providers as well over the past few years. Now it's aggregating them across channel, bringing in some of the walled gardens, back to your point, where we can, and making sure we kind of see it at the audience level to manage the frequency and things of that nature. So actually a lot of topics we discussed about kind of come together through that question.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking it.
One more.
1 second. I will say Initiative has brought a goodie bag for everyone, so please make sure to grab that on your way out, just as I cross the room.
I didn't know that. Great.
Hi, I'm Chad Johnson. Thank you for all of your time and fantastic conversation. Where we started out was really interesting. Someone had mentioned the push for advertisers to be focusing on efficiency, which makes a lot of sense when you look at like the TikTok and short form platforms, and you look at consumer behaviors. We all talk about how attention is getting shorter. Yet what's interesting is everyone up here, their favorite content, no one talked about a viral video. You talked about your shows. And you talked about late night TV, and I agree, it's a beautifully simple model. It's not about creating a show, it's about creating an experience that can be then pushed out online. So it seems like the content creators to some degree are seeing this in the trends of, yeah, people are watching more short form, but there's still a high value in long form. I'm curious from the advertisers that you work with, those who have activated, who are really doing it well in pushing out both that long form and chopping it up into short form to tell a real story across channels.
I think one commonality that I'm finding in the questions, and we hear this a lot too, is like the generalization of people. And I think you answered this earlier too, but like consumers or people, and that word being tossed around, because the answer could be so different based off of who that person is or what age range or demographic of that person is. I think, there could be examples where content has worked really good on TikTok, but built for TikTok, not a cut down of a 30 that then goes to TikTok. I can't think of a brand off the top of my head, but that would probably be my shortest answer, is like building for platform and for consumer or person, not generalized in a larger sense, but using it for that, and I mentioned earlier, experience versus just taking a 60 or a 30 or whatever manifesto you have and cutting it to work on that platform. I think that's what's probably most important.
Just to add to that, from my personal experience, more on the agency side, when we thought about content strategy and our media plans kind of all together, we thought about like the longer form, if we were creating a piece with a partner and it's minutes or whatever long, how does that, you have to think about all of, kind of basics for creative. You have to think about how that plays out in all different lengths, right? So if you're creating a 5-minute piece that is going to be a showcase that lives on a certain platform, first of all, you need to make sure you own it if you're creating it with a partner. And then how do you take that? And I don't know, sometimes you can slice it up and that works okay, but more so, how do you take the nuggets and produce shorter form that either can be the frequency driver for the original viewing of that other content, or even maybe a teaser to go see that type of content. We've had some partner, we're short form on our platform. Most advertisers run anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds. But some have used it, like studios, for example, have used it to drive, whether it's a QR code or something, drive to longer form to check out the full trailer, for example. So I think you can think about it both ways.
I'll be transparent. I'm not a heavy social media user. I've PTSD, post-traumatic snap disorder. May have heard of it, but I mean, the one example that comes to mind for me was the most obvious one on TikTok with the guy roller skating with the ocean spray example.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like it's one of those things where we're all consumers as well, is that as long as it doesn't feel like it was forced, like that just happened because someone found the content to be interesting and then they shared it and so on and so forth. So I think that's where my head goes to, like thinking about who's in the room, is like identifying an area of opportunity from a career growth perspective. Like I talk about this with the team members on my team. Like I'm very aware of what's happening in the traditional video space, the way that I consume it, so streaming and linear television. But I encourage younger folks on our team that are spending a lot of time on TikTok, like they see what Carnival is doing on TikTok or their competitors that I don't see. And I think it's helpful because it does identify, frankly, like I said, an area of opportunity to prove value, whether you're at an agency or on the brand side or on the sell side, like informing yourself of this is how people utilize TikTok, or this is how it could translate potentially to a television screen or be a part of our media plan if we're at the agency. So that's kind of actually where my head went to.
Yeah, and that ocean spray thing is a great example because that fit TikTok.
Yeah.
And then what didn't happen was then no one created a 30-second or 30-minute sitcom
and authentic to
about the guy who roller skates and listens to Fleetwood Mac and drinks cranberry juice. So I think, I use late night as an example because late night has always been modular content, right? It's a monologue, and then it's a sketch, and then it's a top 10 list, and then it's an interview. So that was always content that could be cut down and consumed short form. It doesn't mean that you can do that with any type of content. And it doesn't mean the content you create for one platform can be modular and can fit other things. So I think that's where it becomes important as a brand to think about, like, from a 10,000 foot view, what is it I'm just trying to communicate as a brand? How might I communicate that differently in different places because of the platform it is, and then the mindset that consumer is going to be in when they are consuming that platform.
Love that. Yeah, that's, there's a big debate, I think, in the industry right now about, is all content created equal? Are short form content, is that the same as long form content? I'm not answering the question. I'm just saying, like, if there's an outcome we're trying to get to, if we're trying to get to reach, does it matter? Maybe not. Do people that watch long form content, do they convert better? That's an analysis we probably have to do, right? I would argue, here on stage, that all content probably isn't equal, right? There's probably some that's more effective than others. But we have to go back to that. Like, what are we trying to get to? What do we want to do as a company? What are we trying to do for our customer? Ultimately, we want to get more reach. We want to get more conversions. We want to drive more dollars. We want more efficient ad spend, whatever it is, and then work backwards from that. But this is like a hot topic in the industry right now, like on every panel. So I love that. Good question.
All right. I want to thank our panelists for their time today. The Swissotel for hosting this, our volunteers who made this all possible. If there's any other closing remarks, please share. But I want to thank everybody for coming out. We can hang out here for a while. I know that the Swissotel also has a wonderful bar downstairs. It is a Wednesday, but
we're in Chicago.
This was my day. So so thank you all for coming out. We're really excited to kind of get this stuff going again with CIMA. Brad, anything else? Panelists?
No, thank you to CIMA. Thank you for everyone coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all of our great panelists. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah, appreciate it.